Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. I'm delighted today to be joined by Steve Sullivan, founder and CEO of Jackson Hole, Wyoming-based Stio, direct consumer outdoor lifestyle apparel and accessories brand. Steve, great to connect. We're in the same town here. It's a small world, and really excited to hear about your story. For listeners that may not know, what is Stio and how did this whole brand evolve?
I think you summed it up pretty nicely, but we're an outdoor apparel and footwear and gear and accessories manufacturer based here in Jackson, and we sell primarily direct to consumer through our e-commerce portal as well as through 12, almost 13 retail stores. So we have another store opening in a week in Breckenridge, Colorado, and we also sell to the wholesale channel. So we sell to some of the larger retailers in the country, like the REIs of the world as well. And the business evolved in kind of an interesting way. I had another outdoor apparel company called Cloudveil for about 10 years that I started in 1997 and went through a little bit of the private equity hamster wheel with that one and got spit out at the end after trying to actually reacquire the brand. And so I took a little break and decided what I wanted to do next and really wanted to bring products directly to the consumer and avoid the middleman, especially at first. Although Stio has evolved into an omni-channel business, it at first was completely direct consumer. And so that was the genesis of the business concept, was to do that. And also to allow the consumer to have more input into what the brand evolved into, to how, what we made and why we made it. There's so many intermediaries in the wholesale channel. And now that we're mature enough as a brand, we're able to navigate those. But in the early days, those can be really, really challenging. And so this was a really cool way to be able to push more creative product into the market and see if it was adopted. And it's worked. It's grown quite a bit.
Congratulations.
Since the beginning.
What year did it start? When was your launch time?
We launched the business in 2011, and then we launched our first product assortment to the market in the fall of 2012. And one really interesting thing we did that was fairly non-traditional, we weren't just a digitally native direct consumer brand. We actually we're a very significant cataloger. We still believe in the physical catalog. And so in the first month in the fall of 2012 that the brand launched, we actually put our first catalog in the mail, turned on the website. We also opened a retail store. And so kind of had the whole manifestation of the brand from a direct consumer, marketplace, all launched at once.
And what have you learned through that multi-channel to consumer, these channels? Like there's some people that pick one, there's some others that pick more. Like what's been observations and learnings, and what's the future in your crystal ball?
I think one of the cool things about the direct to consumer channel is that it's really evolved in that it's become, because you can do it digitally without a catalog, although that's gotten quite a bit more costly over the last 5 years, especially the last 3 years, it's still possible. And so it's allowed more brands to have a chance to germinate and start and see how they, what the reaction is from the market. So you're seeing a lot more brands out there, I think, than you would have in the more traditional, we're going to build a product, take it to some sales reps, go to try to put it in some retail stores. The wholesale channel is just a little more complicated to navigate. So I think one of the cool things is you're seeing a lot more creative product, and we pay very serious attention to a lot of startups and what they're doing to try to spur thought in our own brand. And so that's been really cool to watch. You're also seeing, though, a return to the print, to cataloging. Cataloging's a little bit of a dark art. It's hard to get right, and it can be very costly, but it's also incredibly effective. And so it's been cool to see so many new brands evolve out of this digital, native only kind of world, and then grow, and if they prosper, then they start focusing a little more on omni-channel.
Mm-hmm. Now, a number of listeners of Dana Canoe are entrepreneurs, or they're creating a career path. There's plenty of times when people question, hey, is this going to work? When did you know or have confidence that this Stio was going to work?
I don't know. I still wake up every day and and wonder if our next product assortment is going to hit. I guess you go through kind of stages, stage gates in the process. And since this was my second rodeo, it's a little bit different. I knew that I knew how to make outdoor apparel because I'd been doing it for 10 years, somewhat successfully. Although my first brand, Cloudveil, never got to anywhere near the scale that Stio is currently. I knew how to do it. I knew the process, and I'm also still a super active end user. So I use the product we make, and so I know that the product works in the environments that we create it for. So I wasn't too worried about that. I was a little bit more worried about, how the consumer was going to adopt the brand, and you never know. Even though Stio has a unique kind of strategic advantage of emanating from a true mountain community, kind of the Chamonix of America here in Jackson Hole. So we had this inherent authenticity built into the brand, which I think is super important, and was a key driver of the initial success. But I think just in the last few years, as we started to migrate from digitally native brands, direct consumer brands are typically not very profitable for a very long period of time. Some of the most well-known ones out there are still not profitable. And so until we made a pivot about 3 years ago and said, not only are we going to continue to run a direct consumer brand and continue to try to grow at a fairly rapid clip, we're going to pull back on growth a little bit in favor of profitability. The minute we turned profitable, I was like, okay, now we've got a real business. But that was a 10-year run. And part of the reasoning behind that is that we were growing so fast and our customer acquisition metrics were so good that we just kept pushing really hard on growth. But the timing actually proved pretty fortuitous, because as we were pushing to slow down growth a bit and get profitable, it was getting way more expensive to acquire customers. So the timing was quite good there. And we've been able to navigate that quite well. But that was the big key moment for me. Even though the business was very successful from a growth standpoint, and we passed the $10 million mark, and the kind of $30 or $40 million mark, and the 50, and then kind of kept going. Those are all key inflection points, I think, to scale. But profitability was a real key motivator for me.
Well, your comment about you kind of wondering what's next and being conscious and tuned into that reminds me of Jim Collins, author of Good to Great, number of books, and he calls the successful leaders of companies, they have an element of productive paranoia. So you got to have a little edge and risk awareness and be dialed into that.
100%. And I've read all Jim's books, and I am known widely. In fact, my handle on our Slack channel is Captain Seagull. And that I fly around and, technically shit on everything, but it's not so much shit on everything as it is I constantly send little notes here and there about just any little element of the brand that I see that doesn't meet kind of what I consider our standards. And one of the big challenges of a business starting to scale is maintaining that true inherent brand ID. And when we have over 200 employees now. And so there are a lot of different opinions on what that brand ID is. And so one of my big jobs, or what I consider one of my big jobs, is to provide that continual context around the fact that this is the brand ID. And no, that photograph does not look good and does not feel like the brand, or the way that you shot that model for the website might need to be redone, or I don't like the color on the trim on that jacket. So it cascades all the way through everything we do. Um, and you could ask anybody in here. I'm continually commenting, whether it's an Instagram post or how we're presenting to our next customer at one of the trade shows that we now attend. Um, I pay a lot of attention and have constant paranoia, which is a bit exhausting, but it generally is pretty productive.
You mentioned that you wear your product, and that's I'm a huge believer in that in terms of the fine-tunement and attunement to brands or services or products that are being delivered. What's your story? What's your background story of what got you interested more in mountain living or the whole Stio ethos?
Well, I originally grew up in the Midwest. My whole family is from the Midwest, from Michigan and Illinois. And when I was about 9 years old, my mom moved us out to Colorado. My parents got divorced when I was very young, and my mom moved us out to Colorado for it. She was a college professor, and she got a job. And I think the thing that really teed it off for me was I was a big hockey player, and when I was young, I wasn't good or anything yet. I was 9 years old when I moved, but it was all I cared about. And when I moved to Colorado, there was no hockey. I moved to the western slope of Colorado, and there was literally no hockey. And my mom heard about that for about the next 10 years of her life, but she immediately got me interested in other sports, and I started to ski. And I think skiing was my hockey replacement and became my obsession. It was what I was completely obsessed with when I was a young kid. And then I just got more and more involved in the outdoors. But the big catalyst was my uncle also lived. I grew up in Grand Junction, Colorado, and my uncle also lived there. And his girlfriend started truly one of the first outdoor retail specialty shops in the United States. It was called Lewis and Clark. And I started working there at a fairly young age, like in junior high or high school. Through junior high and high school, I worked there and part-time, and it really gave me this like insight into the culture of the outdoors and how people reacted to, whether it was equipment or clothing they were looking for. And that was the original spark. And then I carried that through college. I worked at an outdoor shop and became a buyer there, and it started learning more and more about the business. But I always wanted to be on the other side. I love retail, and I have, we have 13 retail stores as of, I think tomorrow we're having our soft opening in Breckenridge. But I love retail, and I love being on the other side of it too. I love being the person providing the products that go into a retail store. So it's really cool when you can provide the products and have it all be a store. And that's one of the most fun things we do, is because that physical manifestation of the brand is one of the ultimate representations. But that was really the catalyst, was my youth and making this big move, and then, becoming more of a mountain guy than a Midwestern guy. And I moved to Jackson. I did a little stint after college and tried to get a real job in San Francisco, which didn't go so well for me. I ended up moving back here after the classic story. I literally missed my exit 2 days in a row on the freeway because my best friend was moving to Jackson, and he had a job, a ski pass, and a place to live. Mm-hmm. And he called me a couple days after he had visited San Francisco, and he's like, "I just got you a job, a ski pass, and a place to live. Are you coming?" And and I just packed up and moved here. And I've been here for 35 years. He left after a year, but and he's still my dear friend. But I ended up staying, and then went through the litany of kind of ski town jobs, everything from teaching skiing to working in shops to bartending, you name it. But I'd always wanted to do something more, and I started germinating my first business, and just decided to at one point to give it a go.
We are a financial planning company rooted in the Midwest, so love the common connection there. And we talk a lot about true wealth. Like, what's the point of the money? What's life look like where it's fulfilling and energizing? What does that mean to you? Like, what's your energy spots, and how would you define your version of true wealth?
It's really interesting. There's been a lot of studies that have come out recently, and I'm sure you know these have popped up on people's Instagram feeds about, like, at what point does money not, like, elevate your life, right? And I think, they basically say that, once you get past covering the real basics in your life, where you can be fed and clothed and send your kids to college and have a nice roof over your head, it doesn't really, like, change your life that much. I suppose, the one big one that they always forget maybe in there is flying private, which would be fun, which I do not do unless I'm with a friend. But I really see it as this kind of holistic balance of being out. Like, I try to do something outside every day, and whether that's riding my e-bike to work, or skinning, or hiking Snow King, or skiing in the winter, or going for a mountain bike ride or something, I try to get outside and do something every day. And so, like, that is where I find my center, and am able to kind of, like, get away from all the pressures of work and concentrate on something else. And even if that's going for it's walking 9 holes with my boys after work or something, and playing golf, just being outside, I think, is super important, and that's what makes me happy and grounded. Even better is if I can do it with one of my kids. My oldest son is actually a fishing guide now for WorldCast over the hill from us, and so it's really fun. It's been so cool to see his evolution. He's been a guide. This is his 4th summer, and he's just become a tremendous fishing guide. And he rows a boat better than I could ever imagine rowing a boat now, and he fishes way better than I do. And so it's been cool to be able to start to pass that along, because my other kids are all similar in different pursuits, but it's fun watching your kids shoot by you on the ski hill. And
Yeah, and that's a whole element of the wealth of life that's available as well.
yeah, and that's why I think I've chosen to stay here, is because we have that wealth of opportunity to spend time in the outdoors in a really meaningful way. And we have big rivers and big mountains, and I still, that's where I find my wealth in life.
Love it. Steve, I want to thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule to hop in the metaphorical canoe here. Really appreciate your insights and your sharing.
Yeah, happy to do so, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.